Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to another Peaceful Solution Character Education and Certification course. Everyone in the auditorium can be seated. Welcome all of you that are watching online. Hopefully it's warmer where you're at than it is here. We went from summer to winter very quickly, like usual here in Texas. You hear the word fall and then it passes right by. But we'd like to welcome all of you here once again. And tonight we're going to pick up where Catan left off on page 198. If you want to be turning over there, we'll go to the lesson plan shortly, just to remind ourselves exactly what we're supposed to be covering here tonight. But we're going to be concluding the respect unit. And of course, we'll build into the responsibility unit starting the next class. But we're going to conclude this unit. And then, of course, we're going to answer a few questions that were sent in by some of the people that are watching classes around the world. And then we'll get those dealt with. And hopefully we can build up to move along to the next class that we're going to have, which is starting into the 5th unit of the junior high series. And once we're done with that, we'll have completed the junior high series, and then we'll move into what is known as the high school series. But once again, looking at page 198 and holding your finger there, turning over, we want to go over to the lesson plan. Let me get over there real quick. So we're going to be on LPE, lesson plan, page E, and it's the very last, or second to the last, of what we're going to get into here, where you're reading the, you see the 9th and 10th procedures, and of course the one is going to be dealing with, as you get into the poems, that's what Catan would have covered, also getting into the heart of the matter. And then you have procedure 10, which you had an activity, which was playing the song. And once again, when you ask for these or you get these books in PDF format, if you get a PDF version of the book and the audio files are not embedded into the files, let us know and we'll send those to you. We send out many versions of these PDF files, so just let us know if you don't have the one that has the embedded files, and we'll get it to you. But of course, you see here in procedure 10, it says the activity, play the song Imagine, so the teachers, on the teacher's manual audio lesson CD, while students follow along on page 196. Divide students into groups and have them brainstorm answers to the exercise. Imagine what the world would be on page 197 in their handbooks. Have each group designate a spokesperson to share group answers, and the rest of the class emphasize the choices we make in regard to how we respect ourselves and others, and the environment will determine our character, our future, and the future of our planet. So if you notice here, we don't have page 198, but we're going to finish it up because you see it said 197. So we're going to finish up page 198. And of course, Catan finished his class with procedure 1, which was an important aspect of developing positive moral character and a respectful reputation, is to have respect for all life. Now, if you remember, that takes us all the way back even to page 1, where we started, and we'll conclude there once we get done with going through these points tonight. And we're not going to really rehearse too much off of last class, because that's pretty much what the class is for tonight is. It's a rehearsal of everything we've covered in this chapter. Now, he was on the second bullet point, and he got into it just a little bit. And if you look at the second bullet point, it says, even though humans are the dominant and most intelligent species on the planet, we must rely on the Earth's resources for our existence. And of course, when you think of the Earth's resources, there's a vast amount of resources that the Earth has. And it's amazing what the Earth can do and how the Earth can generate things. And it's always great to brainstorm your students, and you can go online and you can type in the Earth's most valuable resources. What are the top 10? What are the top 5? But you'll always find out there's one resource that always comes up as the number 1 resource. You'll always see where water is at the very top. But as we're going to get through class tonight, a lot of people say food. You can go quite a few days without eating. You can even go a few days without drinking, but you can go only like 7 minutes without breathing. So air is extremely important also, but usually they rank water number 1 because everything consists of water, as we've covered before, and that's what we're going to get through again tonight. So turning over to page 174 here to start the review of that second bullet point, you see here on page 174, it says, even though humans are the dominant and most intelligent species on the planet. Now that can be in question sometimes, especially with what we see taking place. When you look over to the Middle East right now and you see people being just destroyed and you see lives being treated as though they're completely worthless, or you look over into Ukraine, or you look into Somalia or Sudan, or you look into what just took place recently here in the United States in the state of Maine. And that's just one situation. The United States continually has what they call mass shootings, where more than one person is shot, a group of people are being shot. And of course, we're supposed to be the most intelligent species on the planet. And the most valuable thing on this planet is supposed to be life. Now, when we spend billions of dollars to annihilate life itself, that puts into question how much of that intelligence are we putting into practice? How much are we actually using of what we know that is right? There's a lot of things we can do that is wrong, but how much are we doing that we know that is right? Well, once again, continuing here, it says we must rely on the Earth's resources for our existence. And we'll also cover, are we helping the Earth or are we hurting the Earth? It says if we misuse or contaminate our resources, then not only will we be affected now, but future generations will also suffer from our failure to respect and appreciate our environment. And you think about that, a lot of people have the attitude that, it doesn't affect me. What do I care? As long as it's great while I'm alive, that's all I need to worry about. And of course, that is having total disrespect, not only for yourself, but also for the generations that come after us. But looking over to page 177, talking about some of these resources that we need to exist, you see the first one here on page 177, it says, let's take a closer look at our valuable resources. And it starts off by saying, one way you can respect the environment is to educate yourself about the Earth's many resources and their benefits. Through education, you can appreciate the value of the gifts that the Earth has to offer. And once again, the education, that's informing ourselves, being knowledgeable. And you see here the first one is air, and it's a did you know. So it's trying to put something in our minds as we went over this. So did you know that without air, there could be no life on Earth? When you think about that, the things we deposit in the air, the things we do to the air, but yet it's something that we need. Air is a mixture of gases that make up the atmosphere surrounding the Earth. Air is composed of oxygen, carbon dioxide, argon, nitrogen, and traces and elements. All living things, including ocean life, need air to stay alive. And that's amazing when you think about even things that live in the water have to have a form of oxygen. Even though a human can't go stay underneath water, not without some kind of apparatus to help you breathe, but fish themselves, there's some fish that are in the sea, and this is important to kind of talk to your class about, and we covered this when we were going through the lesson plan. There's some fish that can never stop swimming. They have to continually swim or to be moving through the water for the water to go through their body so the body can absorb the oxygen out of the water as they proceed through the water. And it's very interesting, and it's really an amazing thing on how everything on our earth is created. There are things that have life, but many different things survive many different ways, where a whale or a shark or, even just your average, bass or catfish can live in water, and they survive different ways themselves and have very different jobs themselves. Thus, as human beings, are very different. We couldn't live the life that they live, but we have to do things to work together to sustain them, because we need them to keep our water's clean, our water's healthy, and the population of certain animals under control. And of course, we talked about how some animals get sick and other animals will reduce that out of the environment so they don't get caught into the other animals, so it actually controls the spread of disease and so forth. And we'll get on that just a little bit more tonight. But continuing along here with air, it says, if you were to isolate each of these gases and breathe them in their pure forms, they would harm you. It takes just the right combination to produce air in a healthy form to sustain life. And if you remember, I think William was the one that brought the class on the rainforest. and the Amazons and how big they are and how much they actually work to produce this oxygen that we need so much. And of course, it's amazing how all of this works in these specific parts of the world actually produce this for everyone. But yet, in all of our wisdom, we're going through and we're destroying most of it because it's like there's not enough empty land to build on. We cut down the rainforest. And it's amazing. If you've ever driven through Texas or you've been through Montana or somewhere like that, you can drive for hundreds of miles and see nothing. And even in South America, it's the same way. You can drive for hundreds of miles and see nothing. You know, I've been there. I've seen it. And it kind of blows your mind when you think, why do you need to start cutting down the rainforest, something that we need, something that produces, it clears, it purifies. Why do we cut down something we need when we have all of these things we're not using to begin with? Well, of course, it becomes with educating ourselves. And, you know, and some people can go about that the wrong way. Some people can get very argumentative. They can do things like spiking trees that can cause people a lot of harm when cutting trees, you know, and there's a lot of money usually is behind of cutting down things and getting exotic woods or doing things to that sort. But we tend to, you know, the human race tends to cut their throat to spite their belly. And that's one thing that we have to be educated in, to know that, you know, the things that are working for us, we need to let them do their jobs. And we need to actually do our part into letting them stay in a healthy state so they can do their jobs. It's when we don't, as the most intelligent species on the planet, we don't safeguard these things, the earth becomes sick. Just like we become sick, the earth can become sick. Well, notice here at the very bottom, did you know your body can survive without food several weeks, without water for approximately 1 week, and without air for only 7 minutes. And we're not trying to challenge anyone to go several weeks without food or several days without water. We're not trying to get you to hold your breath for 7 minutes either. That's just a scientific fact that's been put out that we've used here in the Peaceful Solution. Also, looking over to page 177, we were on page 177. Look over to page, flipping over to page 178. Now, at the very top is what we want to cover here at page 178. It says, here are a few other facts about air. Air surrounds Earth and extends as far as 1,000 miles above the surface. Air shields us from the rays of the sun. Air helps us to keep the Earth warm enough to support life. Air protects us from objects heading to Earth from space like meteors. So that's one thing that the air does for us. And turning over to page 180, let's look at what water does for us. And water is an extremely important source that we all need. And if you go through your life, and a lot of people do this, if there's some people that get into the habit of drinking sodas and other beverages, and they kind of bypass water, you know, and you find yourself when you get sick or you're not feeling well, you find yourself needing to get water in your body because your body needs to flush itself out. You know, your body is a kind of like a factory in itself, and it's operating. And of course, if you keep putting things into your body without putting the things in you need to flush out all the toxins our body creates, which is an enormous amount, it's like trying to run an 8-cylinder engine on 7 spark plugs. It just doesn't work very well. So we have to keep putting in the water to help keep our bodies healthy. Even though I've heard a lot of people say that they just don't like water, there's sometimes I like it and sometimes I don't. But when it's hot, I like it. When it's cold, I don't really care for drinking cold water when it's cold. But it's something we have to drink. It's very important that we do. And here on page 180, you see another important resource that our Earth provides us with is water. Like air, water is essential to life. In fact, not only do all organisms need water, but water is also part of all living things. 50 to 90% of the weight of living organisms is water. So that's how important water is to us. And if you notice, when they say they're looking for life in other planets, the first thing they look for is a water source. And that's what you always see NASA saying. We think that there might be life on this planet because we suspect there might be water. And of course, the very first one you see here is humans are approximately 70% water, which is an enormous amount. That doesn't mean if you want to lose weight, quit drinking water, but that's something that makes up our body that helps us to be who we are. And then you see here It also talks about chickens and elephants, and then pineapple, potato. And then you see the human teeth in itself, and of course the human brain. Imagine that. The human brain is approximately 80.5% water. And we went through all of these things in detail, but this is just rehearsing how important water is and why it's an important resource that we not only use, but we protect. We protect it so not only will it be there for our lifetime, but that it will last for many, many generations. And it's always laughable when people kind of say, if we don't do something now, everything will be polluted. Well, water's been around for quite a few thousand years, and if it gets polluted and it goes away, it's because of the most intelligent species on the earth did not protect it. We kind of abused it. Well, we didn't kind of abuse it. We did abuse it. You know, to the point now to where the most intelligent species on the face of the earth, as we've covered in many classes, is now recycling their own sewage and drinking that instead of fresh water. Now, that's supposed to be the most intelligent species. There's a lot of animals that would not do that. They would not drink water that had something from their own feces in it. But we do that. I say we as the human species, not we as those of us sitting here or those watching online. But looking down, continuing on here, it says the world's water supply. Notice it says water is the most common substance on Earth. Over 70% of the Earth's surface is water, and about 97% of the Earth's water is in the oceans. And of course, that's speaking of salt water. The remaining 3% is fresh water, but 2% of that is in the form of glaciers and ice caps. That leaves only 1% of the Earth's water available for human, animal, and plant life. And of course, all of these things, when they're working and healthy, sustains life, and there's no problem. Let's continue on. It says, if you live in an area of the world where you have plenty of relatively clean water, it can be easy to take the availability of water for granted. Because there are a lot of people that are actually watching online right now that don't have running water in their houses. They have to go outside the house to either a hand pump or to a well where you lower the bucket down, or they go to a stream to gather their water to bring back to their house. And it hasn't been, as all of these things were covered before, but putting back into our minds, and especially we want to make sure we rehearse these things in the minds of our students as teachers. It wasn't that long ago you didn't have the city municipal water systems. It wasn't that long ago you didn't have, city water running throughout the city to where all you had to do is just pay to have your meter turned on, and here come the water in. You actually had to drill a hole in the ground, as many people still do this day, and you had to run a certain system through it, or you just lowered a bucket down in it. And once again, it hasn't been that long ago, and it's important because we kind of lose that with all the technology that we have. We kind of lose that in our mindset that my grandparents grew up without running water. But as we move away from that last generation that grew up that way, we start losing sight of how things used to be. And that's one thing the author of The Peaceful Solution always tried to instill in the minds of people, because he was a person that grew up in the Dust Bowl without running water. And he always tried to instill within people's minds that this technology is great, it makes life easier, but when abused, when not used properly, it can actually be destructive. And by saying destructive, it actually can cause health issues. It can cause medical issues to where you can run to a physician as many times as you want, but if you continually put in bad things into your body, whether it's polluted water or so forth, you're not going to improve, no matter how much you pay to improve your health. It's not going to get better. And then looking over to page 184. Page 184, of course, we have the land. And that is another extremely valuable resource that we have here. And this is all around the world. And of course, you see what's going on around the world right now, and you see things like Chernobyl. You see things like, with Japan receiving 2 nuclear explosions in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And you think about how the land was destroyed, where Chernobyl's still not usable. They still detect radiation there. And of course, why? Why did these things come about? What took place? Well, continuing here on page 184 with land, it says, in addition to air and water, land is also a valuable resource needed by humans, plants, and animals. So notice, it's not just the most intelligent species here that's ruling this kingdom, as they like to say. There's many other kingdoms within this kingdom that the most intelligent species is supposed to oversee, supposed to take care of. Could you imagine if we lived in the soil and the earthworm was supposed to take care of us and they lived like we do? Imagine earthworms dropping bombs all around the world, but yet we're living in the dirt. You would kind of have a problem with the earthworm, right? You know, just imagine the poor ants. They're always working, but man, let them get into your house to try to get a little bit of water, and people declare war on them, you know? And the ants are like, we need water too. We're just looking for water, you know? And it's, you kind of wonder, you know, and I do wonder a lot of times when you see wildlife and you wonder how their mind really processes things. You know, especially if you have a dog or a cat or some kind of pet that is very loyal to you. And you really wonder how their mind truly processes things, because their minds doesn't operate like ours do. Sometimes they're smarter than the most intelligent species on the face of the earth. You know, they know enough not to go drink water that's got their feces in it. That's a plus. But when you think about these things we tend to forget about the things we can't see, especially the microbes that we went through great detail in chapter 7 of the self-control unit. And we also went into a lot of detail with the 7th chapter of the respect unit. But continuing on here, it says all the earth's animals and plants live either on the earth's surface or close to the surface. This can be underground, underwater, or in the air. The land's resources can be used in many ways. Soil, for example, is used to grow grains and vegetables. Rocks and minerals are used to make tools, and iron is mixed with other elements to make steel. In addition to this, wood from trees is used to make paper, furniture, and build houses. And then continuing on, it says areas that are classified as rainforests flank the equator in South and Central America, Asia, Africa, and Australia. Although rainforests account for less than 7% of the land's surface, they contain more than 50% of the Earth's plant and animal species. Some scientists claim it could be as high as 90%. And once again, all of these are pretty much dependent on the most intelligent species on the face of the earth, keeping everything working the way it's supposed to be working. And once again, technology can be a wonderful thing when it is used properly. Looking over to page 185, you see that the first large paragraph, it's below the listing of things that can be found in the rainforest. It says rainforests once covered 14% of the Earth's surface, but through deforestation, which is a process of clearing trees from a forest, mainly through burning, rainforests now cover only 6% of the Earth's surface. So we've reduced that 8%. And once again, you know, think about this and get this into your students' minds. We used to do this when we would take a group of children that trained in this program pretty much their whole life. And we would travel thousands of miles across the United States in motorhomes. And we would always tell them, look at how much land that when we drive down these roads have nothing for miles and miles and miles. And then, of course, you get to the big cities. We went to Washington, D.C. a lot, which has an enormous amount of people per square mile. And you think that, wow, there's just not enough room for people. And you tend to forget about the 1,000 miles you drove, and literally 3/4 of it was completely empty. There was nothing really there as far as you could see. And it's that way when you get into big cities. Once you get outside of the big city, you know, you can even go to New York. You can get into Manhattan or Brooklyn or the Bronx, and of course, it's just people everywhere. But you get into upstate New York, and of course, it's very beautiful. It's, you know, a lot of gardening, a lot of forestry. You get up into Maine and Connecticut and those areas, and you have a lot of beauty. And then you get into Montana, and you don't have anything hardly. There's people there that have ranches bigger than the state of New Hampshire. And that's a lot of empty land. So there is plenty of land to sustain life, but we have to manage it properly. We have to do a better way of managing what the earth and how it affects us. We have to manage it better on what we cause to take place with the earth. Going back over here, let's get to point 3, because we're going to have to move through some of these fairly quickly. But once again, just reminding ourselves of what we've covered so far in the What I Have Learned section. So looking back at page 198 here with the third bullet point, it says air, water, and land are only 3 of the most important resources needed to sustain our lives. There are many resources that contribute to the vast worth of our planet. And if you look over to page 175, and when you think about these vast resources that our planet has, and think about how we destroy our planet, and think about what we do to this planet, you know. How would you like to be punched? How many missiles they shooting a day right now from in the Gaza Strip? 2,000-3,000 missiles a day? How would you like to be punched that many times a day? You know, and how would you like to have all of that? It always, I say laugh, but there's never laughter. I'm not talking about laughing at the war. I'm not talking about laughing at the devastation. But I laugh at people that come out and want to talk about greenhouse gases and say you need to reduce your emissions on your car and drive electric cars, as we repeatedly bomb, and I'm just going to say it the way it should be said, we bomb the living hell out of each other, and we destroy so much stuff, and we're worried about pollution coming out of a car. But we don't worry about pollution that comes from the detonation of 2,000 missiles a day. That is, we're supposed to be the most intelligent species. And the Gaza Strip is one very small piece of land on the face of this earth. There's many missiles going off every day. The United States just tested a nuclear bomb here not long ago in Nevada. Russia's back into it. China's going to get back into it. India and Pakistan. You're going to see them all. And, of course, once again, we are the smartest species on the planet. We're just not showing it right now. But looking here on page 175, and I want you to think about these wars that's taking place when you talk about worth. Because we're talking about not just the water, the air, and the land, but sometimes it's what's beneath the surface of the land. It says there are many resources that contribute to the great worth of our planet. Resources are natural materials that our earth provides. Each resource has the benefits used to either sustain or improve the quality of our lives. For example, clean water for drinking and bathing, grain and vegetables, and animals such as cows and fish are only some of the resources needed to sustain our lives. So they're living from the water that we actually, the water goes into the animals and then we eat the animals, so to speak. And of course, if you put unhealthy water into the animals, then what comes forth from the animals is going to be unhealthy to the human being. But it also, notice here, it says the earth also provides trees to build homes and iron ore to produce the steel that is used in manufacturing of cars, bridges, and skyscrapers. So once again, if we can encompass, and sometimes it's hard to do this because we think everything comes from the hardware store. But everything that's produced, everything we see, whether it be the steel beams in this building, the plastic tables, you know, that we set out, they call lifetime, that lasts for 5 years and that's their life. Not to knock on the company though. But when you talk about these things that are made, it all comes from something that the earth produced. And really have your students brainstorm. Tell them to ask them, tell me something you could produce that the earth itself did not help bring forth. And the number one thing everyone says is a baby. Well, not really, because the two people that created the baby, they came from the earth too. Everything comes forth from the earth. If you think you don't, then quit breathing, quit eating, and quit drinking. Because that's all part of what the earth produces and how it becomes part of us. And there's many more scientific facts that show there's other things, but we'll just keep it that simplistic for now. But of course here, this part is where we get into the wars. It says, in addition to this, the earth also provides us with other resources that are valuable because of their rarity. And you have the beauty of them, which is diamond, gold, silver, and rubies. Mined from the earth are valuable treasures. Gold and silver were once used as money in many countries. But these precious metals are now more widely used in jewelry, ornaments, and in industry. Well, why did gold and silver get replaced in the monetary value? There was something else that's in the Earth's surface that was determined to be more valuable, and that's known as oil. As they say, the black gold. And when you see these wars taking place, what do they usually fight over? Well, they fight over land and the valuables that are in the land. And that's truly what it determines what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. But I want to give you a listing. These are some of the top, they had listed as top 20. I'm just going to give you a few. But think about how all of these things and how they affect us. The earth produces these things. And yes, it's a scientific fact. Oil is not dead dinosaurs. We've brought that out many times. I knew it was in the textbooks when I was in school. They called it fossil fuel. You still hear politicians call it fossil fuel. And even though people laugh about it these days, it's very well known that the earth produces this oil. It's a scientific fact, but it's still called fossil fuel, even though that's not true at all. I guess we can start calling cars that use gas, we'll call them electric cars. That'll make us feel better about ourselves. It's not true, but it's about as close as saying fossil fuel. But here are some of the things, which is oil, coal, iron, of course, the forest itself, a lot of all of the food that's produced, natural gas, which is a huge industry in itself, copper, which that's what you use for your electricity, iron. You have the minerals which come forth from like the soil and the salt itself. Salt is a very important substance that is needed. And then you have the biotic, which are living and organic materials. These are things you can't see, but if you're going to produce food, you have to have them. Whenever you're growing a garden or you're producing food, to keep the food alive, you have to keep all of these organisms and microbes healthy in the garden, and they're what's producing the food itself. And then you have like bauxite, which is the main ingredient in producing aluminum, which if you don't have electrical wire and copper, it's usually in aluminum. But all of these things working together, and you think about how much aluminum is in our lives, whether it be from, the conduit itself, the cans, you see mostly aluminum where it's being recycled. You see a lot of cans. You see people collecting those on the side of the street all of the time. But that's just a brief example of what's being used. And then, of course, gold itself, most people don't know they own gold. And they say that in the world today, almost every individual owns gold. And the only reason you own it is because it's put into these. Every cell phone has a very, very small amount of gold because it helps the companies that produce the cell phone that's needed in helping the system themselves work as a conductor. And even though it's a very small amount, you're not going to be able to take it into Walmart and pay your bill with it, not unless you use an Apple Pay or something. You can't trade it. But everything has this in it. And of course, when you think about a lot of countries right now storing up massive amounts of gold. Now, I want you to think, if you had the choice between filling this building with gold or filling this building with food, which one would probably benefit you the most? Yeah, gold probably isn't going to taste too well. You could probably have gold teeth. That's about it, though. When you think about the things, you can live your life without ever touching a piece of gold. And you can see that in society today. We're getting to the point where you can live your life without touching cash money. You can digitize everything now. But this is what we're going toward, and this is the things that when you look at all of these things the earth produces, how the most intelligent species on the planet has turned everything into a mass money deal. That's the reason there's countries in Africa that a lot of other countries will fight for, such as Ghana, which have some of the largest diamond mines in the world, but they have not been developed yet. That's why everybody wants to be a friend of Ghana. And you have Nigeria, which has an enormous amount of oil, but everybody wants to be a friend because it's not developed. And then you had Sudan cut in two from southern Sudan and Sudan. Why? Because southern Sudan, which is one of the newest countries on the face of the earth, well, what caused the war and why did the United States and other countries, not just the United States, go in, cause a coup and divide the land? Well, it was just an accident that the new country, South Sudan, contained a lot of undeveloped oil. That couldn't have been on purpose. That was just purely coincidental that people were fighting over undeveloped land. You know, when you start putting these things together, once again, we say the most intelligent species, but that doesn't mean we act like it. And that's what the peaceful solution really does to, when we bring out about this respect unit, it's recognizing that we all live on the earth. Everyone has a right to what the earth produces, and they have a right to using it in the most healthiest way that is possible. And without that, we have sickness. We have disease, and that's what we see taking place throughout our society. Now, looking back over to page 198, and looking here to point 4, this is where we really abuse our planet. You know, you hear about child abuse, you hear about spousal abuse, you can have parental abuse, you can even have adult abuse, but nobody seems to care too much about abusing the planet unless there's money involved. That's usually where it comes from. Here it says, polluting and overusing our resources have contributed to depleting the state of our environment. And looking back over to page 178, we talked about depleting and destroying. And of course, we all talk about that word pollution. And putting this back in the mind of the students, here you notice it says, although clean, unpolluted air is essential to life, many people fail to appreciate the value of this resource until breathing becomes hazardous to their health. Now, I'm going to say something. I'm not going to knock anybody because we already went to the self-control unit. We've already discussed what negative character is. But think about, your body needs clean, fresh air to survive. And then I want you to think about the last thing that we were asked to teach in the schools were about these vaping devices. Because these vaping devices are showing that they destroy the lungs. So here you have a species that needs clean air to keep it healthy, and for some reason we want to put things in our mouth that are not clean, that are not healthy, and that destroy the body. Now, once again, we're supposed to be the most intelligent species, and this is what we do as a society. Well, does it cause health problems? Well, you have many things now that they come through. There's every time there seems to be a health problem, we give it a new name. You know, I think the latest, greatest one is COPD or something like that. Well, how, it's not that if you got it, of course you got it. The question is, how did you get it and what can be done so that other people don't get it? And I'm not trying to bash anyone that has a health issue or a lung issue. But the question is, what could we have done to help prevent these things? And of course, they came out with this campaign back in the 1990s and early 2000s against the tobacco companies. And I remember because I lived in North Carolina at that time, back in the early 1990s. And it was one of the biggest sponsors of one of the biggest sports down in the south region of the United States, which was NASCAR. And of course, when they came against the cigarettes and the tobacco companies, they pulled out of the racing industry altogether because the money that was supposed to drop. But still, after all of these health warnings, you can go into a service station here in Abilene, and they'll have on the door when you walk in telling you, we're selling you a product that is proven to destroy your health. And I went into one here not long ago, and I noticed the whole checkout counter, the whole part, except where you could put a few things, was covered with these products they say will destroy your health. And I asked the lady behind the register, I said, are these the products that you have the warning sign on the door for? And she smiled. She goes, yeah, it's our best-selling product. I thought, you got to be, you sell more of these than you sell drinks or chips or cookies. She goes, we sell more of those than gasoline. And I thought, yeah, and we're supposed to be the smartest species on the planet. Well, sometimes we're so smart, nobody can tell us anything. That's the way it works. But looking back here on page 178, we want to see this. You see this word pollution, and it's very in bold letters. Notice it says, pollution is any additional harmful substance to the air, land, or water that can result in damage to the environment, human health, and the overall quality of life. Now, once again, I wanted to put that in your mind, how a lot of humans willfully put this right in their own mouth and they inhale it. But yet we tell people we need to reduce pollution, but yet we sell things so people can individualize pollution for themselves. And it starts becoming very confusing when you think, well, if you're not supposed to have it in your lungs, why are we selling it? Why are we even making it? Why are we producing it? Same thing with bombs. If they don't solve problems, why are we producing them? Notice, continuing on here, it says, air is a great carrier of pollution. With the right wind currents, pollution from one side of the world can eventually make its way to the opposite side of the world. Therefore, air pollution is everyone's problem. Some pollutants are natural, like a volcano that erupts and spews ash and smoke into the sky, but the majority of pollutants are man-made from industries or industrial factories that produce electricity and the exhaust fumes from vehicles all over the world. Well, I haven't seen many people getting down on their knees and inhaling from their exhaust pipe, but I do know there are people are making a lot of money off of devices where people stick them in their mouths and they inhale it that way. So I don't think you really have to do very much except, I guess, give it some kind of flavor and people will run to get it. You know, you can get, here's cherry flavored pollution. You're free to inhale it. And we're only going to charge, I don't even know how much this stuff costs. I'll just say $9.95. You know, and it's, you think about this and you really kind of shake your head and think, where did we get this idea from? Well, somebody had an idea, somebody liked it, somebody seen they could make money with it, so here we go. Well, you know, it won't, it's going to kill people. People are going to die anyway. You know, you have the right to choose. Well, and that's true. You do have the right to choose, but you don't have the right to harm someone else. And if what we do brings harm to the environment, we should really consider, instead of saying secondhand smoke, you should really consider what it is that's being done. But continuing on here, the very last sentence on this page, it said it also puts a serious strain on the heart and promotes certain cancers. And looking over to page 179, it says some air pollution returns to the earth in forms of acid rain. I know David brought out about showing, and he explained on how brand new cars being delivered to the car lot would have to automatically go into the repair shop because of acid rain. And he talked about the smell and down when he worked in Houston and how those things were really strong and how they affected the earth in general. Well, once again, continuing here, it says acid rain is formed when sulfuric acid and other elements put into the atmosphere in the form of smoke from industrial factories, exhaust fumes, or other sources mixed with water vapor and fall to the earth as rain. Acid rain corrodes buildings, damages crops and forests, and makes lakes and streams unsuitable for fish and other plant and animal life. So continuing on here, let's look over to page 181. And looking down at the bottom of the page, you have, of course, here you have the water supply we talked about just earlier, but you see the acid rain, and then you see the herbicides and pesticides on the bottom of page 181. And once again, you're just reminding your students of how this pollution and how this pollution is made and what's causing this pollution. And you have illegal dumping of toxic substances. You have spills from oil tankers, plastics, and other debris. And once again, think about this. We produce an enormous amount of plastic and styrofoam, but yet we don't know what to do with it when we produce it, but yet we created it from the earth. And for some reason, we can't figure out how to get the earth to absorb it back in. So we're smart enough to make it, but we're not smart enough to get rid of it unless, well, you drink out of that bottle, give it back to me, I'll melt it down, then I'll fill it back up and sell it to you again. You know, and recycling things, there's a lot of things that can be recycled, but there's some things that when you start dumping them in the ocean and they start gathering in the ocean, and we've seen many pictures, a lot of photos of what they call third world countries that they don't really have the ability to recycle these things. And what they're doing in other countries, if you've ever traveled to what they call a third world country, you still get Coke and Sprites and Pepsis and all of these sodas you see here in the United States. You still can get those in the plastic bottles, but they're much smaller because they don't really have a recycling system and they don't really have a source. They'll try to sell them. They'll sell them to China. If China will buy them, the United States does that too. And China will repurpose them. But a lot of these countries don't have that ability. So they sell them in smaller things. And if you go to countries, third world countries, when you get a juice, it's in a cardboard box. They're not in plastic containers like here in the United States. So you have to open it up. We call the children here in the United States, they're used to getting the little, cardboard boxes with the straws you poke through it. Well, if you go to a third world country, as they say, that's the only way you get juice, or you get it in a glass bottle, that's the way it used to be here in the United States. But everything has kind of changed to plastic. And the best idea we can come up with is Sprite has decided not to use green bottles anymore. They're going to use clear bottles. Well, why? Because the clear bottles can be repurposed back into bottles that are used for other sodas, because there's not a coloring agent into it. So now it can be used for all of these other things. Of course, that does help a little bit, but you try to think about what else can we do. And if you create something that you can't reabsorb back into the earth, or use it, have the earth absorb it, if it comes from the earth, it should be able to go back into the earth. And if we do something that causes it not to take place, we have to truly consider what it is we're doing. So looking back over here to the bullet points, we want to go to bullet point, fifth bullet point, so we can get through this. I'm kind of moving slow on these. The fifth bullet point, it has that animals have always been an important resource, providing us primarily with food, transportation, and clothing. Now looking over to page 188, food, transportation, and clothing. And this is throughout history. You can look back through mankind's history. And of course, certain animals have always been a food source, and certain animals has always been, as they list, as scavengers, or like trash cans. They help clean up the earth. And how many people recently went into your house and decided, I got food in the cabinet, I got food in the refrigerator, but I think I'll go look through the trash can. That's where I want to look. It's already cooked. I just have to warm it up. Well, nobody would do that. But we tend to go through the animals that are labeled as human trash cans, and we turn those into food devices or substances. And, you think about these things bring forth sickness. They bring forth disease. But here on page 188, it says, animals also deserve our appreciation and respect. And it says another vital resource that shares the land with us, yes, it shares it with us, we're responsible for them, is animals. Have you ever stopped to consider how valuable the animal kingdom is to human beings? Now, that's very important, because without animals, there's a lot of things that's going to go all to pieces very quickly. There's a lot of things that animals do. They clean up things. And when you live out here in the country like we do, you see dead animals all over the road. And there's actually animals that actually come clean those up. There's no truck that's coming by from the city to pick them up. There's no tractor coming by that scoops them up, well, unless you get the really big ones that are out there. But these things are cleaned up by animals themselves. Now, could you imagine if you have an animal that's rotting on the side of the road, and you see the flies and it's swollen, and here comes another animal and they're eating it up, as you often can see if you see a dead deer. If you go through at night, it's not rare to see hogs out there, wild hogs, boars, eating the dead deer, the rotten deer. And then here you have somebody that wants to shoot the pig so they can eat the pig that ate the rotten deer. And you tend to think about, it just doesn't sound tasty. I tell you what, we'll leave it at that. Moving along. But once again, animals have always been an important resource, providing us primarily with food, transportation, and clothing. And transportation is very common. It's once again, the way we live life here in the United States is so different than other countries. You can go to another country and it is normal to see a burro, a donkey, carrying a wagon that is hauling a load of stuff for everyday use. It's extremely common. Kind of takes you back when you first see it until you see it enough and you realize this is something that's still going on to this day. Notice it says they single out, going back up here a little bit further, this says predators like the lions, bears, although dangerous, also play an important role in the ecosystem. They single out animals that are weak or sick. By preying on those animals, they help control the population. So once again, these animals, they can operate within themselves. Then looking down here where you see these pigs protesting, it says animals also assist us in keeping the earth clean by consuming carcasses of dead organisms and other waste. Pigs, vultures, lobsters, catfish, and shrimp are only some of the scavengers that fall into this category. In addition to this, there are also microscopic organisms that consume the waste from other animals. A lack of understanding of this vital role animals play in keeping our environment healthy and functioning has led to the extinction or near extinction of many species. So every animal that's on this earth has a purpose, as we see over here on page 189 at the very bottom, and it says, all animals exist for a purpose and play a role in keeping our environment healthy and balanced. It's up to us to value, appreciate, and respect the animal kingdom. And of course, respect them for not only what they are, but the jobs they do, and give them the freedom to do their jobs. You know, don't go out there thinking that, you know, as we read where there was one time where they killed off all of these insects that were coming through. They got rid of the birds in the rainforest. They killed off all of the birds that were coming through. And after they got rid of all these birds that were there, they considered a nuisance. Here come the insects in and destroyed everything. When they couldn't figure out, well, where did the insects come from? Well, they were always there. It's just the birds they killed off were eating the insects. We have the same thing here in Texas, West Texas, with martins, the purple martin. You have purple martin, they control the mosquitoes. If you don't have the purple martins, you have an enormous mosquito problem certain times of the year, especially if you have water tanks, which are very common in Texas for livestock, or people have other sources of pond water sitting around. Looking back over to page 198, and we want to go to bullet point 6, and it says the Earth's resources could soon be reduced to a point at which the living world would be unable to sustain life in the manner of which we know it. And look over to page 194. Page 194. Let's look at 193 first. It says, getting to the heart of the matter. There was once a common misconception that the Earth's resources could not be depleted. You know, when you think about that, where people think that it's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. You know, we got tons of water on this earth. But the reality, when you only have 1% you can actually use, that makes it a little bit different. But yes, we do have a lot of water on this earth. The earth is mostly water, as we said. But there's only 1% that we can actually use. But that common misconception that we can't deplete it, individuals and organizations alike took it for granted that as they cleared away forest, trees would simply grow back. It was thought that toxic chemicals dumped into streams and rivers would harmlessly float away, and that garbage thrown into the oceans would simply sink to the bottom with no consequences to our environment. We mistakenly believed, and we're going to get into what a mistake is when we get into the Building More Excellence unit. Mistakes can be done through a lack of education, but it becomes a bad choice. We mistakenly believe that there would always be enough clean water to drink, forests to supply us with oxygen, lakes to provide us with fish, and rich soil with which to grow grain and vegetation. But as you have learned, the Earth's resources are not inexhaustible. Given time and continued lack of awareness, respect, and appreciation, the choices we make as individuals and as a society will continue to deplete and pollute our air, water, and land. We can no longer afford to take our planet and its resources for granted. And of course, looking back to the bullet point here of 7, and it says, with education and a positive moral character, which includes traits such as respect, responsibility, compassion, and determination, I can begin to make a difference and encourage others to respect the environment and its resources. You know, we'll also throw in the next one because they're both on the same page. Bullet point 8, it says, I can help to educate others about the value of respect, for just as I learned how to be respectful, others can too. So looking over to page 194, and of course you get imagine what the world could be. And that was a song and of course other parts of information we put in for learning tools into the Peaceful Solution. And at the very top of page 194, it says, with knowledge and a positive character, which includes traits such as respect, responsibility, compassion, and determination, you can begin to make a difference by respecting our environment and its resources. Don't just stop there. Educate and encourage others to do the same. For just as you have learned about the value of respect, others can too. Keep in mind that educating others about respecting our environment must be more than teaching them to pick up trash from the ground, recycle containers, or conserve water. Although these are excellent ways to address the problems of pollution and overuse of our resources by themselves, this intervention will not be enough to change the direction in which our planet is going, and it's going in the wrong direction. You see many forms of disrespect, whether it is directed toward others or the environment, and it is a problem that begins in the mind. In other words, the way people think and what they are influenced by, combined with a lack of concern, can lead to disrespect. Therefore, when you educate others about respect, be knowledgeable and prepared to explain. And of course, here the very last paragraph deals with the bullet point 8. It says, knowing the facts. Now, this is actually getting the truth of the matter, not opinionated base, not something that takes lobbyists in Washington, D.C. to promote, but getting the facts will help people to make positive choices about how to respect and care for themselves, others, and the environment. Making a difference by educating others can be as simple as explaining to your parents why using pesticides on the lawn can contaminate drinking water. It might mean writing letters to the industrial plants in your area, voicing your concerns, and reminding them of the need to properly dispose of toxic chemicals. Does that mean they will listen to you? Most likely they won't listen to you until enough people are infected or become sick so that someone has to do something because it's affecting too many people. So that concludes the respect unit, and we really don't have time to get into this, but I'm going to give this to you as students, all of you that are here that are training to be teachers. We decided to bring, we get questions for the Peaceful Solution all the time. And I want to give you this one, and this is a great question that was sent in. And we always ask people to ask questions, and this was a question concerning what they heard in one of our classes. And I'm going to read to you the way the question was sent through email to us. And of course, once again, we appreciate when these things are sent in because we want to be able to make sure that what we're teaching, we get across exactly as the author of the Peaceful Solution wanted it brought forth, and the way that it should be taught to mediate situations to where we bring forth peace. And of course, the topic of this question dealt with racism. And it says, on the subject of racism, it was stated that there is a little bit of right and a little bit of wrong in everything. It's also stated that we need to be careful not to take sides. Having been negatively affected by racism in several incidences, I would like to know, in order to understand the statements made, so please teach me what the little bit of right in racism is and the little bit of wrong is in speaking up and standing up against racism. Because I thought the Peaceful Solution was about standing up for only what is right instead of sweeping it under the rug whenever it appears it isn't. Peaceful Solution Character Education Program supposed to stop all of the wars, all hatred, and all peoples and nations. So that's the question. And I'm going to give you the class that was taught because I want you to go back. I think it's probably great that we give you time to go back and study this for yourself because that's a great question. And everybody has a right to ask these questions. And the class that was in question was given on April the 26th of 2023. So April the 26th of 2023. And I'll give to you something to listen for. It would be easier if I taught the class to tell you what I was thinking. But there was a comparison of racism can be like Democrats and Republicans. And I'm going to get into this next class to answer this question to show what we teach. It's actually in the respect unit, and that's what was being taught. And you can go back and read pages 96 and 97 to get into that information to prepare your mind for it. But it was compared to Democrats and Republicans. You can say right now Palestinians and Israelis. When you get into racism, racism itself is negative. There is absolutely no positivity. There's nothing positive that comes from racism. But when you have groups that are racist, and we tend to think as racism as, as they say in the world terms, blacks and whites. But I can tell you, I've been to South America and I can't tell the difference between a Colombian, a Venezuelan, a Peruvian, an Argentinian. I can't tell the difference between them, but they sure can. And there's a division between groups like that. I personally can't tell a difference between a Japanese, a Chinese, a Korean, whether they're North or Southern, someone from Thailand or the Philippines. I personally can't tell the difference, but they can. People who are raised in those areas can. Now, there's also divisions within that. You can think about the example that was given with Republicans or Democrats, or you can look at Palestinians and Israelis right now. Every group of people has something positive they're trying to stand for, but they also have a lot of negative they're bringing along with it. Whenever we look back, and we've read before about slavery in the 1800s in the United States, there was nothing positive about oppressing people whatsoever. It wouldn't have mattered what color skin they had. Zero positivity comes from oppression and beating people. But what's the difference between beating people with whips and bombing them with bombs right now? If we think we've escaped slavery in this world, we deceive ourselves. But there is positivity between, I can tell you, I'm positively sure the Israelis have something that's positive. And the Palestinians have something that's positive, but there's a lot of negativity going in it. And we're seeing the results of the negativity. You can have Asians, Hispanics, African Americans, or the whites here in the United States. There's a lot of division. I was raised where there was racism. And I'll be the first one to admit, you can go back and see our classes. I call racism the most stupid thing on the face of the earth. You have to have a tremendous lack of education to be racist. And we went into detail about how there is very little difference between us as human beings. Very little difference. You have to have a decimal and a couple zeros and then put a 1. So we're going to answer this question, but I think it's very important. Go back and carefully listen to what the teacher said, because I don't think you're going to find that he endorsed racism. His whole class was against racism. But he did do a comparison, and sometimes we might not hear that comparison. We kind of hear part of it, or we don't hear it when it's being compared to the book. There is positive things that come from many different areas, but if you have this much positivity and this much negativity, the positivity just drowns out. You can have one thing you're wanting to stand up for that's right, and if you have another 100 things that are negative, you're never going to get it across. You're never going to be a benefit to society. And we'll go through and explain it, but racism in itself is morally wrong. It's disgusting, and it will never be in a world where the peaceful solution is applied. So I'd like to thank you. And once again, when we start our next class, bring your responsibility units, because that's what we're going to continue in. But we're going to answer not only this question that was sent in, but we're also going to answer a question about, does the peaceful solution teach that COVID started in a lab? Not for sure, but we'll answer that question too. Obviously, we're not here to try to endorse invading China or anything else. But I'll quickly just tell you, but we'll answer it in detail. No, the peaceful solution does not think there's many diseases. If we're just going to blame COVID in a lab, I don't know what you do with the other 5 billion diseases that's being created by mankind by not keeping these very simple rules. Our next class will be on the first day of the 11th month. So here we have November the 1st, and it'll be at 5:30. And the first thing we're going to do is address the question on racism. You can bring your your respect units if you want to, because that's where we're going to answer the question from. And then I'll bring some stuff from the acceptance units also, and then we're going to get into the introductory to the responsibility unit. Once again, thank you for joining us.